The sea had been calm when they hauled it up, a calm so heavy it felt staged, like the ocean was holding its breath. The net had caught on something far below, something that took all 4 men to drag to the deck. At first, in the dim dawn light, they thought it was just a rock, black, slick, perfectly smooth in some places, jagged in others, but the longer they stared at it, the less it looked like anything shaped by nature. Jonah was the first to touch it. The moment his hand brushed the surface, the air seemed to tighten around him. "It's warm," he muttered, but they had pulled it from a depth where the water was cold enough to kill in minutes, warm and faintly pulsing, as if something inside was alive. The others laughed it off. "A freak chunk of volcanic glass," they said. They kept it on the deck as they finished their haul, but every time Jonah passed it, he swore it had shifted just slightly, like it was finding a more comfortable position. By the time they reached shore, the air had turned strange, heavy, damp, and a smell clung to them, even over the salt and diesel, a smell like wet earth and rusted metal. They decided to leave the thing in the boathouse, just until they figured out what to do with it. The next morning, Jonah found the door open. The rock sat in the same place, but the boards beneath it were wet. Not just wet, swollen like they'd been soaking for days. He knelt, touched the wood, and felt the same faint warmth he'd felt on the deck. That night, he dreamed of the deep, not the ocean he knew, but something far older. A place without light. Shapes moved in that dark water, shapes too large to comprehend. He woke with the smell of rust in his nose. Over the next week, the thing began to change. Fine hair-like threads pushed out from the jagged parts, glistening like kelp but dry to the touch. They curled along the floorboards, reaching for the walls. The other men stopped visiting the boathouse. Jonah couldn't stop. He swore when he stood close he could hear something. Not quite a voice, not quite a sound, a pressure inside his skull. By the 12th day, the threads had thickened. They weren't threads anymore. They were tendrils, jointed in strange places, with a dull sheen like polished bone. The smell in the boathouse was unbearable now, but Jonah barely noticed. He spent hours there, staring at the thing, his lips moving with words he didn't understand. When the others confronted him, he didn't remember what he said, only that it made them go pale and leave without another word. That night, the storm came. The sea was black glass under the lightning. Jonah ran to the boathouse without thinking. Inside, the meteorite, if it had ever been one, was no longer a rock. It had opened, not like a shell, more like a wound. Inside was a darkness deeper than the room around it, and from that darkness came a slow, deliberate movement. Something was pushing its way out. The tendrils had anchored themselves into the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. The boards groaned as if the whole building were breathing. Jonah stepped closer. He felt the warmth on his face now. The pressure in his skull became a clear voice, speaking in a language older than water. It told him of a time before the sun, of a sky without stars, of a hunger that had waited at the bottom of the world for longer than memory. He didn't remember kneeling. He didn't remember pressing his hands into the black wound. He only remembered the heat flooding into him, and the sudden understanding that what had come from the sea was not here to feed. It was here to grow. The next morning, the storm had passed. The boathouse stood empty. The walls were damp. The floorboards were warped. And where the meteorite had been was only a hole, not in the floor, but in the world itself, edges slick and glistening, leading down into a darkness that moved. The other men burned the boathouse by nightfall. They told themselves it was over. But in the weeks after, fishermen began bringing in strange catches, fish with too many eyes, crabs with limbs in the wrong places, and sometimes, when the tide was low, the smell of wet earth and rusted metal drifted in from the horizon. Jonah was never seen again. But sometimes, on nights when the sea goes still, people in town say they can hear something far out in the deep. 3 slow pulses. Pause. 3 slow pulses. Pause like a heartbeat. Waiting.